and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk, the Bronx's flagship television talk show. The phones are open tonight, so please call in at 718-960-7241. You can also email comments to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Well, we are all horrified at the oil leak that continues to gush from under the Gulf of Mexico. It's also a constant reminder of our nation's reliance on fossil fuels. But can this environmental disaster become a wake-up call for cleaner energy alternatives that can run our cars and trucks efficiently without spoiling the environment and sapping the earth of precious resources? Tonight's guests think so, and we're going to present their ideas to you in an effort to spur our thinking on how we can change our energy systems. We have two in the studio and one on the telephone. Please welcome to the show the BOEDC Executive Vice President Kate Shackford. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. And also the Associate Director for Community and Public Affairs of the Center for Sustainable Energy at Bronx Community College, Luis Torres. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
And on the telephone, I'm thrilled to have the chairman and founder of the world's first chain of privately funded fueling stations for fuel cell cars. It is Tom Sullivan. Tom, can you hear us? Are you with us?
Hey, Gary. Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Do we have Tom?
Thank you.
I see his picture, but I don't hear him. So maybe we'll get to Tom in just a minute. Let's start here. Mr. Torres, it was pretty exciting very recently that it was all over the news, certainly locally, that the Bronx had an electric truck. Tell us, what is that electric truck? Tell us about that.
Well, it was the first medium-duty electric delivery truck in New York. And it was it came from a company called Smith Electric Vehicles. And the great thing about the truck is that there's no emissions from it. It's zero emissions, runs on electricity. The business charges it at night. They get up in the morning, make their deliveries, and then they come back and plug it in.
How is it charged up? I mean, you plug it in?
Yes, there is a plug. It
Sorry.
is a 220 volt type of plug, so it's not what you call an ordinary plug. It's a little bit more juice that goes to it, but an electrician can put that in.
With electricity, we know it also uses energy. Is it more efficient to plug it in and use the electricity that charges it up versus what it's going to take to fuel up a truck like that and have it make its deliveries?
It is more efficient because it's significantly less money, per mile for something to run on electricity than it is for gasoline. Gasoline is a lot more expensive than electricity.
I have many more questions. I want to I know Mr. Sullivan is now with us. Are you with us, Tom?
Yes, Gary. I can hear you.
Good. Okay. I'm sorry we didn't catch you before. We're going to come around the room and get to you and talk to you about your very interesting innovations as well. Ms. Shackford, tell me about funding a truck like this. I mean, every one of us who drives a car would say, well, if I can do it and if it's efficient, why can't I get one? What did it take to get this electric truck in the Bronx?
Well, there was partially funded through a grant from the New York State Energy Research Development Authority, NYSERDA, and then BOEDC provided two loans. One was a zero-interest loan of $100,000 and then a $90,000 4.5% interest loan. So we tried to make the money as cheap as possible.
How much was it?
$190,000 in all.
$190,000. Well, now you know why each of us don't have a car like that.
It's really about getting a critical mass. Once we get enough of these trucks on the road, the cost is going to come down dramatically.
Well, of course. Before, again, we go to Mr. Sullivan, you plug it in, how long does the charge work, And does it perform the way we'd like all of our vehicles to perform?
So far, it's performed well, according to the owner of the business, Ed Taylor. So he said that it's working fine.
Mm-hmm. In other words, it would, if you're driving in the street, other than maybe there's a note on the side of it, you wouldn't know that this is an electric car and he's just going along at 30,
well,
40,
you
50
do
miles
know
an hour.
there is one glaring, noticeable thing, and that it is so quiet that you expect a
I'm
roaring
only
engine.
laughing because that's the good news.
Yes, and so some people are concerned about it actually because they want to know when a truck is coming, but I certainly see that as a plus. And if we had hundreds and maybe thousands of trucks running on electricity and not these combustible engines, then you would have a much quieter city, and our streets would be quieter.
Well,
and so
quiet would be, I would say, a side benefit, although, of course, the people who live near very busy intersections would say, no, that would be a major thing. I want to get back to this cost. Now, $190,000 for one vehicle sounds like a lot of money, and certainly it is. You say if we do more of them, are there plans to have more of them, and how do we roll that out in the long run?
Well, I believe the Smith Electric has 5 or 6 already being ordered and being manufactured.
For us here in the Bronx or for nationwide?
Nationwide,
Okay.
I believe.
well,
And
actually in the Bronx.
in the Bronx.
In the Bronx,
so it's
okay, great.
And then there are other manufacturers who are doing this. Zero Truck is another one who's just done a prototype for a city in California, and they're very happy with it. And so now they have orders for 4 more.
Okay.
So it's a small growing industry.
To me, the idea is what are the possibilities. Speaking of possibilities, let's bring Tom Sullivan from Sun Hydro back. Tom, tell me a little bit about Sun Hydro and what is it that you do so that people in the Bronx can understand your perspective.
Yeah, Sun Hydro is a fueling station for hydrogen cars, and we make it the hydrogen on site with solar. So there's absolutely no fossil fuels, no emissions. A hydrogen car, the only thing that comes out of it is a little bit of water. Mm-hmm. And we're setting up these small stations, but just to pretty much get it going from Maine to Florida over the next couple of years.
What sort of a vehicle does this hydrogen fuel and get running? I mean, is this a vehicle that is manufactured, can be manufactured, will be manufactured? I mean, obviously you can create the fuel, but we've got to know what it's going to be used for.
Well, yeah, no, there are a lot of hydrogen cars on the road today. Honda, GM make some of the best ones. Toyota, all the major car companies have hydrogen cars, hydrogen fuel cell cars, and that's part of the problem. A couple of years ago, I bought a company called Proton Energy up in Connecticut that makes the electrolyzer that converts the water to hydrogen. And after learning a little bit more about the industry, the people didn't want to build all these cars because there was no hydrogen stations, and no one wants to build the hydrogen stations because there's no one building the cars in mass production.
It's kind
so
of
there are cars here and there that, but not in mass production yet.
Right. I guess it's kind of an ironic thing, because here on one hand we have the electric cars and we have the electricity. Obviously we have it, but we don't have the cars. In your case, we have the cars, but we don't really have the fuel to fuel them. Do people have hydrogen cars now, and they're out there kind of starving for places to fill them up? Is that what I'm understanding from what you're telling me?
Well, they have them in. DC. There's stations around. There's one in Long Island. There's one at the JFK Airport, but they're more industrial type commercial stations where they're not really open to the general public. That's part of the problem. In California, there's a few more, but it's kind of the car companies want to get them out too. They want to start making them, but they need to test them. So the first one will open in up by Hartford, Connecticut, in a couple months, and then the car companies have a couple different companies have committed to putting cars in the area, and we'll give them to people in the area, use them. Then the company will, the auto company will test them, see what needs to be done different, and so forth. And
give me the performance. I mean, do they perform as well? And I know Mr. Torres here runs an alternative fuel vehicle conference, so he knows a little bit about it too. But just is your sense that, goodness, we could simply if we could do it, we could simply replace it, and everybody would be happy because the cars run the same?
Oh yeah, they get about 350 to 400 miles per fill up. They run just like a regular car, except quieter. A couple weeks ago, there was a convention out in Long Beach, California, where I drove the Honda and the GM and one other one, a Toyota, and they're beautiful cars. And that's, electric is good too. You don't have the batteries, and you don't have the charging time. You can fill it up and go just like a regular vehicle. You just have zero emissions.
Just to point out.
Sure, let's bring Mr. Torres in because I know you work on.
I just want to point out that a little bit closer to here, we also have hydrogen. There's a hydrogen station here in the Bronx.
Really?
At a facility for the Department of Sanitation, which was recently built. And Westchester and also the city of White Plains has a hydrogen fueling station. So you do see hydrogen being used in places not too far away from here.
And does the New York City Department of Sanitation use hydrogen-powered vehicles?
Yes, I believe that they were. I'm not sure which vehicle it is, but
they have a vehicle, singular.
Yeah,
well, that's
but
a good start.
They have started, and so that's encouraging to see variety in the alternatives out there, because there's no one particular technology that you can say at this point is a silver bullet, so to speak.
Right.
So you need to try these different technologies and put some investment into them, because we all benefit from that.
Tom,
that's a good point. That's a say as well. It may not be down 10 years, or maybe not hydrogen or electric, or something that we're not even thinking of today. But we just need to keep looking for something and replace the gasoline, which not only the problems in the Gulf that we see, but the smog and sending $1 billion a day over to the Middle East to buy oil is crazy.
Tom, tell me about what would it take. Let's just say that ultimately, after all of these things are analyzed, and let's just say that hydrogen vehicles are and it's kind of understood that this is the best way to go. What would it take to make it so that the New York City Department of Sanitation doesn't have one vehicle, but many vehicles, and then it becomes the kind of the way that energy is used in our community in the Bronx and all over the nation?
Yeah, that's it. Part of the reason why I'm doing that is just to get, it's not going to be a moneymaker, but to me it's to get hydrogen exposed and to get it used and get more cars out there. Because it's like when the cell phone first came out, the technology wasn't that good and it was very expensive. And once we start making the cars, and there are hydrogen buses in use now. City of Hartford has a couple hydrogen buses, and we just did a fueling station out near San Francisco that has hydrogen buses.
Right.
But it'll just keep, the technology, as the more you use it, will get better and it'll get less expensive. And it just needs to me, I think the biggest way to get it going would be tax incentives, rather than grants and all that stuff. Just if someone builds a station or buys a hydrogen car or a bus, they get some type of tax break, which will get things moving quicker.
Let's bring Ms. Shackford back in, because you work on a lot of the funding for this, and you worked on the funding for the electric car. I guess a similar question from your perspective: what does it take to make it so that, whether it be the electric cars that we're talking about here in the Bronx or the hydrogen vehicles that Mr. Sullivan is talking about, what will it take to have that really have impact on our energy picture in the United States?
It'll take a big commitment on the part of the government, not only in terms of the money that they're beginning to invest in these technologies to get the prototypes out and to begin to mass produce them, but also giving people tremendous tax breaks, because until we get the critical mass, the numbers will be very high. Once those come down, then you don't need to give the tax rebates. Mr.
Torres, do you believe that, dreaming or thinking big, that if the resources are put in place, ultimately this can turn out and we can severely impact what we're spending on fuel cells and on oil and fossil fuels and things like that?
There's no doubt in my mind that we can turn this around. It does take a tremendous effort, but we have the means to do this, and we have the resources to do this. It takes the will, and as Ms. Shackford said, you need government assistance, and there's a choice that has to be made. There are billions of dollars that go into subsidies for coal and oil. Let's end corporate welfare in those areas and put it more into renewables that deserve their fair share.
I have an interesting alternative, speaking of alternative perspective. Long story short, through a series of connections, a Bronx Facebook friend has a friend who lives in Texas, and he has a wholly different perspective on this idea of alternative vehicles. So I kind of challenged him and said, well, if you believe what you say, you can call in from Texas and we'll get a whole different perspective. So Ron from Texas joins us on the phone. Hello, Ron. How are you?
How are you, Gary?
I'm just doing fine. So your perspective here, I mean, we've exchanged some email or some Facebook notes. Your perspective is that oil, drill. Am I characterizing that correct?
At least for the point of vehicles, oil is the most efficient store of energy. Basically, what you're looking at is something to store the energy, and then for the vehicle to use it afterwards. While hydrogen, natural gas, they're all good. It's very expensive to utilize this, to compress natural gas, and to compress, actually more expensive to compress hydrogen. To use it in a vehicle, and there's no infrastructure currently. Mm-hmm.
Well, now let's just, this is the conversation we were just having. If the resources are put in and we had the infrastructure, then you would say, good, now we can ease up our reliance on oil and stop drilling down there in the Gulf?
Well, again, the issue with the Gulf is I see as a whole separate issue. We need to become less reliant on foreign oil. We need to have our own sources of oil. We need to open up places like Anwar, move drilling closer to shore. We have oil, shale oil. As the economies are there, we have enough energy. But for the government to subsidize these things currently, it's going to create diseconomies.
Let me just, I could respond, but let's let our guests respond. Did you have a thought about what you just heard?
Yeah, I think it's environmental suicide. I mean, it's exactly what the Gulf is showing us, and to bring it in even closer to shore would be a nightmare. And we can replace it with electric cars and other cars.
Well,
if we put the money into it that we put into drilling, and the tremendous infrastructure that is the oil industry, we could have alternative fuels that would replace oil.
What Mr. Torres had said was that it wasn't the money we lacked, it was the will. Mr. Torres, you had a response?
Well, there's nothing more efficient than getting energy from the sun, which you don't have to pay to get, or at least not pay a tremendous amount of money, or from other types of renewables like wind or biofuels as well. So it is very expensive to extract and refine oil. And as we see in the Gulf, and then, by the way, this is not, the one spill. The other day in the Daily News, Juan Gonzalez was writing about thousands of spills that have occurred in the last 10 years. They don't get reported, but there's tremendous damage through those spills. So it is very costly.
I want to let our phone guest weigh in. He had something he wanted to say, and I cut him off. So, Ron, did you have a response to what you had heard?
Well, yeah. I mean, if we're talking about renewables such as solar and we're talking wind, they're all great technologies. Problem is, what do you do when you don't have wind? What do you do when you don't have solar?
You make it into hydrogen and you store it.
A coal-burning plant standing by. Okay, it's very expensive to turn a coal-burning plant on and off. So you're wasting energy trying to supplement on these times when you don't have the solar or the wind.
Okay, let me let our experts, Mr. Torres, you're a scientist.
Well, Tom had a contribution to that, but
and we'll get Tom back.
But our point is that there are tremendous costs for continuing with business as usual, and so we really need to change our mindset about how we use our energy. The other thing that we haven't talked about is conservation, which also plays a role, using less energy. we use a tremendous amount of energy. We need to get into the habit and change our culture to use less energy, and that will help as well in the short term.
And the reliance on overseas. Tom Sullivan, go ahead. You wanted to weigh in, and we'll give you the floor. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, a couple of things I would say. I mean, the $20 billion, or it probably costs more than that, but, 20, $30 billion that we spend cleaning up the Gulf, we could build all the infrastructure for a number of cities. Look at L.A., you go up in the hills and look over L.A., just filthy with smog. You could, build an infrastructure there, and, and we thought that way that, it's easy right now to drill oil, and it's easy, cheaper to put in our cars. I mean, it was cheaper to buy hay and feed the horses too, but we got to think ahead and do what's better in the long run.
Tom, ultimately, whose money is going to be used to clean up the Gulf?
Who knows? I mean,
right now,
currently BP has made the commitment.
Well,
that's of course.
If they write the check, then we'll see. But
Tom, let me ask you this: give me a dollar amount that if just dreaming, let's say somebody said, okay, Sun Hydro is going to get whether it be a governmental grant or tax breaks, how much money would you need, or would the hydrogen industry need, in order to have impact that could really say, hey, we've done something here, and now we've begun the process of converting our energy systems? How much money? $1 billion, $2 billion? What would you need to get started?
For the whole country, I'm putting it out of my pocket to build hydrogen stations from Maine to Florida. No government assistance, nothing, just to do it.
I understand. I'm just saying, if you had the access to the resources, what would it take?
For the whole country? I'm not sure. It would be in the billions, but I mean, I'm sure you could build.
Let's use the $20 billion for a number that's being used to clean up the Gulf.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You could build a very big infrastructure with the $20 billion,
and it would have impact. It would ease the reliance on international uses of oil, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, you could. Take a city for LA, for example. You could clean up the smog in that city with the $20 billion, and not only is it the clean energy, we're creating a technology that we, instead of importing $1 billion a day in oil, we could be exporting the technology all over the world and create a whole new high-tech industry in the U.S.
Ron, to be fair, did you want to respond to what you just heard?
Well, I have no problem with private citizens or private companies investing money. But for the government to take on that task, I know we do it. I know we do it in other areas.
So then let's eliminate the tax breaks that we're giving to the oil industry and move that over into
I have no problem with that. I have no problem eliminating tax breaks, subsidies that we give to oil industry.
Okay, Ron, we got to let you go because we're just about
all right, Gary,
running out of time. Thank you. We'll undoubtedly communicate at a future time. How's the Bronx doing? Let's start with you, Mr. Torres. How are we doing with vehicles, with alternative vehicles and things like that? Where does the Bronx stand?
Well, in some respects, the Bronx is on the cutting edge because you are going to see more of these electric trucks. Coca-Cola has gotten the similar funding through NYSERDA for getting its electric truck. And Frito-Lay, which is has a facility in the Bronx as well. Coca-Cola, Frito-Lay both have facilities in the Bronx. They're getting 5, I believe, electric trucks. So you're going to see this gradual increase in the technology being used. And so I think we're on the cutting edge in that respect.
Ms. Shackford, the people of the Bronx are always concerned about jobs. And you know what? The fact is the oil industry has a employment infrastructure. Is there a way to convert those jobs? Because obviously if you ease your reliance on that industry, then you're going to move it to something else. Is there an infrastructure that could keep people at work?
Yes, and we're at BOEDC, we're working hard to create the market for green jobs. You have to have a market. So, for instance, we funded the installation of 330 kWs of solar, which is more than any other borough, along with what other people have done in the Bronx. We have more solar than the rest of the city. We have 13 green roofs we funded. Which is another industry which cleans the air and it produces green jobs.
I have to cut you off to make sure that Mr. Sullivan gets a chance to weigh in as well. And the borough president clearly has made it clear he'd love to develop some all kinds of green industries, including the manufacturing of solar roofs and solar panels, which certainly would bring jobs. Mr. Sullivan, talk to me about what maybe some of our viewers who are listening and said, gee, I'd love a hydrogen vehicle. I'd love to be more efficient. I'd love it to be quieter. What is the prospectus like for them that they can get a hydrogen vehicle and then reasonably use it. I realize maybe not on every street corner, but have ways that they'll be able to fuel up their hydrogen vehicle.
Yeah, if there's a hydrogen station in the area, then the car companies, they're mostly concentrating on where there are hydrogen stations, and they'll you can apply to Toyota, GM, and get a
and
car.
simply get a car, but you should be aware of where a station is before you go that route.
Yeah, and there's a few around there, and actually at Proton, the company that makes the electrolyzer, the conversion from water to hydrogen, we're going to have a home unit coming out this fall that you could put solar or wind on your house, or you can just plug it into the electric, and you'll produce your own hydrogen right at your house.
Right, Tom. We're going to have to run. Sunhydro.com is the website.
Yeah, sunhydro.com and protonenergy.com.
I hope you'll stay in touch with us and let us know of every development, because in the Bronx we try to be as forward-thinking as we can, and I think that matches up with what you're trying to do.
Can we invite Tom
sounds good. I appreciate it.
Oh, you know what?
Good conversation.
Tom, stay in here for one more second, because Mr. Torres is about to promote something, and we want to invite you to be part of it.
We'd love to have you at our fall Alternative Fuel Vehicle Conference, September 24th, here at Lehman. Last year we had 2 hydrogen vehicles, the GM model and the Toyota model, which
good.
We're using in the New York
So it's September 24th. It's the Center for Sustainable Energy. I'll help you all make the connection with Tom. Kate Shackford, Louis Torres, Kate from BOEDC, Louis from BCC, and Tom Sullivan from Sun Hydro. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Folks,
thank you very much.
Good. If you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at BronxTalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future program. Archives of our show are available at blip.tv. Just search for Bronx Talk. Next week and the week after, some excellent programs coming up. We'll do a show next week about Bronx arts and also Bronx photography, and maybe even some video in that show. Then the week after, July 5th, a must-see show with a concert band from PS 76 in the Bronx. I promise you will love it. That'll be July 4th. Bronx Talk, Monday nights at 9 for the last 15 years here on BronxNet, Cablevision Channel 67, and Verizon Fios Channel 33. Special thanks to producer Jane Folloro, and to you, good night.